of us, and we'll go through the requirements one by one, and then we'll talk about how do we achieve this. So the first requirement is to use Citrix Managed Desktop to provide desktop for end user. User should be part of Active Directory domain managed by the end customer. Active Directory will be running out of a server on Azure. Now, which basically means is you have one server on Azure, which is configured as an Active Directory domain server. Local Active Directory will sync up with Azure Active Directory to enable authentication, and we'll use AD Connect to achieve this. We'll use AD Connect, and we'll synchronize our local AD with Azure AD. For accessing the desktop, you should sign in using Azure AD. So basically, the workspace has to be configured in such a way that it is using Azure AD credentials to sign the user in. Now, how this is going to work and what are the different components which are engaged in this. So the first thing which comes in is your Citrix CMD. The second would be Azure. Now, this Azure is considered as a subscription, and all your machines and everything is going to be here. The third part is the Azure AD, because this is what is going to be used for all the authentication purposes. Now, the Azure, which the customer is going to manage, basically a subscription on Azure, will contain all the server, which will have AD server, AD Connect server, certificate and PaaS server. And since we are going to use the customer, all the VDA would be on the customer side. I have placed VDAs over there. So Citrix CMD is going to provision the VDAs on the customer subscription. Now, how this is all set up now, so how the user comes in and how it is going to work. So first of all, the user will go to the workspace, and the workspace is going to redirect the user to Azure AD for authentication. Now, once the authentication has been done, or in fact, let's look at how the authentication will work. So AD Connect server has a link to the Azure AD. So AD Connect server is synchronizing everything with the Azure AD. Now, when I say everything, which basically means user, and in here you can customize it to sync a particular OU where the users would be. So once the Azure authentication is done and the user has gone back to Citrix CMD, then comes the brokering part. So Citrix CMD is going to provide a video address, give the user an ICA file. Now, consider a normal situation where you don't have certificate and PaaS server. So in that case, when you talk about Azure AD and Azure AD-based authentication, that's going to be a SAML authentication. So under SAML token, we don't supply the password. Now, if we don't have the password, your SSO will not work, because the credential wallet service will not have the password, and when the token is supplied back to the end computer, that will not understand the token. It will prompt you for the authentication again, and that's where the fast server comes into picture. So once the user gets the ICA file, it is going to get to the VDA. The VDA is going to contact the fast server, get the certificate it has generated for the user, and then that's how the logon will work at the VDA. So client, this will be fully a different process. So client would not even know about it. It's all going to happen in the background, and client will just see the desktop which is being presented to him. Now, let's look at what is the configuration which is required for it and how it is done. So we'll start off with the Citrix configuration and creating a catalog. So once you create a catalog, first of all, you need to select what kind of machines that you're going to use. The second part of it would be subscription. Now, as per requirement, the VDAs has to be a part of the Azure subscription, which is managed by the end customer. So here you will select the this particular subscription, which you have we have already added. Now, resource group. So this is where the machines are going to be created. So once the Citrix CMD has started the process of provisioning machines or creating machines, this is where the machine would be placed. So in this case, I'm selecting CTX resource, I'm selecting a VNet, and then a subnet. Now, the FQDN part, OU part, and the service account. Now, FQDN is the FQDN of the Active Directory. So if you look at here in my DC, the FQDN is going to be Azure auth.site. So that is what we are going to add in here. Now, FQDN. So this is the OU where I have to place the machines once they are created. So if you look at the property, the best way of getting it would be go to the distinguished name and just do a copy paste over there. So you will have the location in here. So this is what you're going to place. Service account name are the one which is going to be used to create this Active Directory account for this computers which are going to come in. Then comes selection of machines. So what kind of machines are you going to select based on your workload? And then you need to select a master image depending upon, again, the requirement, and you will name the catalog. So once this is done, this is the type of catalog that you will see over here. And the next step would be to provide access to the user. So you'll go under subscribe, and that's where you will provide access to a group or a user. So in my case, I have created a group which has 2 users in it, which I'm going to show you in a second. So let me cancel this out. So I have created 2 users over here, and then this group is the one which has all the 2 users in it. So once I have to give access to this catalog, I have just added these 2 users. So now creating catalog is done. My machines are created, and I'm good to go ahead and test. But there is another part of it which we yet have to configure, which is authentication part. So first off, I'll show you how the machine looks like when this is being created. So these 3 machines are part of my AD setup. So this is my AD server, which has the certificate server in it. My connector, which is responsible for synchronizing the users with Azure Active Directory, and the fast server for single sign-on. Now, these 2 servers that you see over here, the Edge 1 and Edge 2, these are the 2 connectors that I have. And the third is going to be the worker server or the VDA. So this is under my subscription. Now, let me take you through the steps of configuration of AD sync. So I have configured one of the server to do a AD connect. So this server is responsible for taking the user and then synchronizing it with the Active Directory of Azure, so Azure Active Directory. Now, if you look at here, there are 2 users that I have created, CMD1 and CMD2. And once you have this AD Connect server configured and in place, this is going to synchronize the users with the Active Directory, and it'll show up something like this. So if you look at the source is going to be the Windows Server AD, and then the FQ, the UPN is going to be the same. Now, the configuration of UPN can be different because it might be very much possible that internal domain may be citrix.int, which is internal, and the external domain may be citrix.com. So there is a way under AD Connect where you can change that, and I'll attach a link for that in the document as well. Now, users are ready. Now we have to configure the Citrix side of it to enable us to do Active Directory authentication or Azure Active Directory authentication. So first thing that we do is we enable FaaS. So if you look at here, this is the resource location I have, which is connecting to my on-prem, not on-prem, but my Active Directory, which is running on Azure. So if you look at these 2 machines over here, Edge 1 and Edge 2, these are the 2 exact machines which are running here. So in this resource location, excuse me, I have to run a FaaS server as well. So all I need to do over here is just click on the add FaaS server. Now, in this case, my FaaS server is already configured. I'll show you over here. So once you click on the FaaS server, it gives you a download link. And you need to download this fast server software onto your the server which is going to be acting as a fast server, and then install it. So I have attached a document for configuration of fast server, and I'll show you how the fast server looks like. Now, once you configure the fast, it is going to look something like this. So deploying certificate, certificate authority, authorized service, that is a part of normal fast configuration. And after creating the rule, the most important step over here is to connect to the Citrix cloud. Now, once you connect to the Citrix cloud, you need to select which resource location you are going to connect to, because users would be coming out from that resource location, and that's where the authentication has to perform. Now, once this is done, the next step would be to configure the authentication on Citrix CMD. By default, so by default, it is configured to do Active Directory authentication, and that we need to switch to Azure Active Directory. But before switching it, you have to configure the Active Directory for authentication. So you will go down to Identity and Access Management, and under Authentication, you will find Azure Active Directory. Now, by default in the CMD configuration, it is always configured to use Citrix Managed Active Directory subscription for Azure. That you have to disconnect, and you need to connect to your Azure Active Directory subscription. And then you can do it by just typing in your global admin credential and then selecting the Azure Active Directory subscription that you have. Now, once you are done with this part, then you'll come down to workspace configuration and authentication. Now, inside it, first off is you need to change to Azure Active Directory, because that's where the users are going to be authenticated. Now, once that is done, then you need to enable fast, because if you don't, as I said, if you don't enable fast, your users would be prompted, because Azure Active Directory is doing a SAML based authentication. So as you have configured the fast already on your resource location, you can just go ahead, and here it'll be a link for enabling fast. Just click on the link and your fast server would be enabled. So that's all the configuration that you need to do from the Citrix workspace configuration. Now let's see how it works. So I'll go to my cloud URL. So this is from an end user perspective, for which the account has been synchronized. Now, this is taking a little bit of time, so let me walk you through a couple of more things here. So when the user is going to sign in, what you will see over here is under issued certificate. So for example, if you look at here, I got a certificate by the name of CMD user 1. Now, for the demo purpose, I'm going to sign in with CMD user 2, and then we'll see how what is the change which happens. All right, so finally we got to this. So I'm going to type in CMD user 2. I'll supply the password. And I don't want to be signed in. All right, so now, as you can see, I am being redirected to the Citrix workspace now from the Azure AD page, and then I'll see all the desktops which is being assigned to me. So expectation here is I'll see this particular desktop or this particular catalog, because this is the only one which I have right now. So if I go under desktop, this is the catalog which should show up over here. My apologies on the delay. It seems like the network is working a little slow today. So again, while it is working, let's take a recap. So what happened? I went to my Citrix Cloud URL that redirected me to Azure AD where the user is authenticated. It kept me or put me back to the Citrix Cloud URL once again, because I have the token now as I am authenticated with the Azure AD. And now I am going to come back to my Citrix Cloud and then to the workspace where I'll see the desktop which is being assigned to me.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so now as you can see, I got my desktop over here. So the test catalog is showing up. And now I'm going to launch this and we'll see how it works. All right, so it is launched. My expectation is going to be that I shouldn't be asked for authentication and I should get directly in. Now, while it is launching, let me give you a background or info. Okay, now as you can see, this has launched and I am signed in to the Citrix managed desktop, and it has not asked me for any kind of credential. So this is the desktop which has just came up. Now let's see what happens in the background. So if you look at here, it was just one certificate for CMD user 1. And now since I have logged in with CMD user 2, let's just pull it up and see. This is the CMD user 2. So now what it does in the background is, let me just go ahead and refresh it. And as you can see, I have the second certificate for the CMD user 2. So the FAS server is going to contact your certificate server to get this certificate generated for CMD user 2. Now this is based out of the UPN of the user. So this certificate is made as per the UPN which is being supplied by the Azure. So if you look at the UPN of the user, in this case it is Azure auth.site. So this is what has to match with the user which is there on Azure and the user which is there on premise. So if you look at here, it was Azure auth.site for the Azure user. And again, for this user, it has to be, the UPN has to be same. Azure auth.site, CMD user 2. So that concludes our demo for the Citrix Managed Desktop for Azure AD. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions.